Hey there, Python programmers, coming at you today with a video on importing. Importing is really important in Python because we have a lot of built-in modules we'd want to import, other files, and ultimately then dependencies. So before we get into the code, I want to talk about the different reasons we might want to import. And I want to talk about all the wonderful built-in modules in Python. I actually want to show them to you. But first, we need to enter the help menu. And when we're in here, notice it says enter the name of any module. If you type in modules, it will give you a list of all of them, although it may take a few seconds to generate it. So Python has lots of really helpful built-in, comes with your Python installation modules that you just might not need in your code. So you're given the option of importing them when needed or not importing them when you don't need them at all. One of the examples I love to use as a built-in module is the random module. I will use that commonly to build games because you need some sort of random number generation to make games fun. But if you're not making a game, there's a chance you don't need any sort of randomness. So again, if you're able to import it when you need it, but not import it when you don't, that's just going to make your code faster when it doesn't need it. So again, great thing in Python. We just do need to know how to import things so we can take advantage of it. Here we see there's our random module I was talking about. Readline, it's tons of built-in modules. OS is one we will use. UUID is a helpful one for generating unique IDs. There's a whole numbers and math. Again, Python is a data science language. Tons of different dependencies we may need. So let's talk about how we can go ahead and use them. First, we got to quit out of the help and then the Python REPL. Let's clear up this terminal and let's talk about some code. So if we want to bring the random module in, we can import random. So far, pretty easy. And then if we want a random number, let's do random.randint. Randint will generate a random integer between and inclusive of the two values you give it. So 1, 10 means we're getting random numbers from 1 to 10, and 1 to 10 will be included. Let's go ahead and run this file. And again, we're going to see random numbers between 1 and 10 for sure, and inclusive. Cool. So we can see it's working. Now what we did though is we imported the entire random module, but we only used a single method on it. Again, this totally works, but we can be a little more precise. So instead of importing all of random, we have a keyword called from, and we can say from random import randint. So we're directly only importing that method, not the entire random module. The other thing it allows us to now do is directly call randint. We don't have to random.randint because again, we're just importing the method, not the entire random class. We should see no change in our functionality here at all. Just again, a little bit cleaner syntax for sure. Now, if we wanted multiple methods from that random module, we can just list them out. So if I wanted a sample, and a great one is choice, we can just list them out as many as we need. This also creates the idea of a decision. Do we need the entire random module or just a few select things? It will depend on your code. Again, if I needed 10 different methods from random, I might just import the whole random module because listing all 10 out here might get confusing. On the other hand, just a couple, this is a little bit cleaner, provided you know what these do. Hey, this is usually a great way of doing it. So this would be our syntax for, again, importing an entire module with import, or being a little more precise, picking the module and then picking exactly what we want to import. Now, let's talk about importing from different files because that is also important. It's going to use the same syntax, but again, let's go ahead and practice it. Anytime you're importing from one file or another or any other, subfolder, you're probably going to want to open up your file structure to help you out. I also will say that in Python, first of all, there's only importing, there is no exporting. So if you have named things in a file, you can export them. What I mean by named things are variables, functions, or custom classes. The things you have chosen a name for, you named them, you can import them using their name. You also can only import up in Python. Again, this sounds like a limitation. It's really not. Most of the time, your program application has a main py or a dunder init py, and that's what's going to run your entire application. It's what starts up, and then again, you import other functions, most likely, or classes into that file that you have defined elsewhere in subfolders. So again, while it sounds like it might be a limitation, it's not at all. Let's go ahead and make a new file. I'm going to call it helpers1.py. And helper1, that's fine. Let's write some code in it. So def add 2. These are not going to be incredibly complicated functions at all. Again, our goal here is just to define a function in another file and then use it elsewhere. Good practice would dictate giving doc strings, maybe, again, more meaningful functions. For now, we're really just demonstrating how those imports work. Cool. So again, not complicated functions. Definitely now that we're working in separate files, remember you do need to save the code there. Very important to not forget that, because when we import it, when you import the methods, functions, classes, variables, it's going to go find that file and make sure that that exists. If it can't find the file, or what it's looking for that's named doesn't exist in that file, we would get an import error. So also, if you do leave the file you're importing from open in VS Code, it will help you out. So again, if you're using VS Code, great thing to do. So our syntax, still using from, we now need to use a file name instead of a named method or module. So helper1, we can import, and then it should also help us the wonderful 2 little functions we wrote there. Cool. Let's go ahead and print out using them just so we can see, hey, they're working. We got access. And let's keep the argument simple. We're not trying to learn math here. We're trying to learn importing. Cool. Let's give it a run with our 2 new functions imported. See what we got. There we go. And look at that. Again, our randint is generating the 8, but 4 and 6 are coming from our add2 and add3. So we are totally now able to import things from another file. Cool. Let's go ahead and talk about importing from a folder, and then we're going to talk a little more about that folder structure. But first, we're going to need to make a folder. So let's go ahead and make a folder, and we will call it helpers. And in that helpers folder, we are going to want to make a new file. Let's call it helper2. That sounds about right. helper2.py. Cool. Note, we did get this PyCatch folder made for us. This is something that VS Code did because we started importing from one file to another. VS Code is creating an import cache to make future importing faster for us. If this bothers you, you certainly can delete it, but spoiler alert, it's just going to keep making it for you. So I'd say just leave it. Again, its goal is to speed up your importing. Probably would want to git ignore something like that, though. Inside helpers 2, we got to make some more helpers. I don't think we have one that adds 6 yet, so let's make that. Feel like we might be doing one that adds 8 next to, but hey. And maybe in this file, let's also go ahead and define, we'll do a list just to show that, hey, we totally can have variables too. I'm going to call this names, real simple. My name's a good one, and let's throw in a cat or 2. Where'd we go? Whoops, B-U-E. That'll work. Again, you can, provided it's on a comma, you can, go to new lines in your lists. So let's go ahead, save this all up. Now we've got to come back here. Cool. So again, make sure that file's open and get the help from VS Code. From helpers. Now again, we've got a dot further in because there's a file. So the helpers is the folder. The dot gets us then to the file inside the folder. But then we should be able to import add 6. We should be able to import add 8. And we should even be able to grab names. Boom. And now let's go ahead, use them in here so we can show that they are being imported. We'll keep the argument the same to keep the math at a tolerable level of ease for the day. Boom, boom. And let's print out our names too. Save, give it a run, and look at that. Again, made a new PyCatch because, hey, we have new imports from a new location, but totally we've got, again, our add 6, add 8, and even that list of names is all coming through into our main file here. Really cool stuff. So again, now we can import from a subfolder, a file in that. Last thing we're going to talk about for today is creating something that we call a module. We can make our own modules, kind of like the ones that are built in. There's a special file. We need to call it to do that. And we're going to turn helpers, instead of just a subfolder with a file, we're going to turn it into a module. To make a folder a module, you need to make a dunder or double underscore a init file .py in that subfolder. This is now a module. Think of it, if you're familiar with JavaScript, if in a folder there is an index.js, JavaScript knows to default read that file inside that folder. A dunder init is Python's version of that. If there's a dunder init file in a folder, Python knows to look in this first. What this allows us to do is control all the imports inside of helpers without needing to know about the file structure from the exterior. So our dunder init is where we want to import everything. And then when you try to default import from helpers, it's going to look in the dunder init. Let me show, and that hopefully will explain. So here we have add 6, add 8, and names. In our dunder init, we want to import those. So from, now because we're in a folder, we actually want to use a dot helpers too. That is telling Python, hey, from within this files folder, I need the file helper2. And let's, again, same syntax from import. Let's grab our add 6. And now let's also grab our add 8. And we can grab our name. Now, technically, you can, if you need to, define more things in this file itself. Again, it's just automatically going to read this file when it accesses the helpers folder. So if you want to define things in here, totally can as well. Again, depends on your organization. Up to you. We're going to return, again, num plus 10 for our silliness. Cool. Save this. Now, again, what this is going to allow us to do is coming back here to this. We don't need to know the different file structure of helpers anymore. What we can do is just say from helpers, because again, it's a module, import, and again, now we have access to all of them because inside of that subfolder in that dunder init where we imported everything, well, that's where this is all happening now. So again, we should still have access to all 3 of these, but we also have that bonus add 10 to our 2 S. And again, now we're importing all of that again, but we don't need to know the structure of helpers at all, because again, the dunder init is importing everything into it. Helpers is its own self-contained module. We just need to know what exists in there to import. Couple last things I want to mention about importing. Aliasing. That could also be important, and that involves namespacing. Let's say for some reason we made a function here called choice, and it doesn't have to return anything. Sure. So The issue we would currently have is we are trying to import something called choice from random, but we named something choice here. Now, ideally, just don't do that and name this something differently, but maybe we can't. Maybe choices used all over the place would be real difficult. We can alias our imports using the as keyword. So there with our choice, if we want to name it something different, we say choice as, and we could call it picky instead. Again, now when we call it, we would need to call, picky. Picky needs a list. So again, we'd have to define, a variable, pass it in, whatever. Just, would have been so easier to do this with one, whatever. Cool. So again, hopefully we can visualize the fact that picky is now what we call the built-in choice from random. So again, we're still able to use this custom choice and get our choice built in from random functionality. We just alias and name it something differently. That's pretty much it with our importing. Again, this is definitely one of the more complex topics we've talked about, but super important as we build bigger project files to get dependencies and have multiple files working together. So that's it for importing. Hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you soon.